Dear Mr. Bainish, the clerk's office is unable to process your motion to convene federal grand jury. Please refer to the United States Attorney's Office for assistance. We will hold your copies of said documents for 30 days. Thereafter, if we do not receive instructions from you, your documents will be destroyed. If you have any questions, call our office at area code 085411300. Beyond Abernath.
Hi, Mr. Banish. My name is Leanne, and I'm with the U.S. District Court in Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm calling regarding your motion to convene a federal grand jury, and I wanted to let you know that the material that you had submitted to the court will be forwarded to the grand jury. They are scheduled to meet this Thursday, so they will be provided with the materials that you sent us. If for some reason they do not meet on Thursday, there are times when the U.S. Attorney has scheduled time that they convene the grand jury, but at the last minute the U.S. Attorney changes its mind and it does not present anything, so at that point they're told not to come in. And if that happens, they will be given your materials at the next time that they come into the court. So again, we will be passing along your materials to them this Thursday or as soon as the next session is scheduled. If you have any questions, you can call me. My number is area code 808-541-1304. Thank you.
Mr. Bainish, I am unable to provide you with copies of the documents you have requested. There was no document generated to transmit your affidavit. As for notification of the matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I personally contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Hawaii. I did not memorize my contact with them. Leon Abernathy, Chief Deputy Clerk, U.S. District Court, District of Hawaii.
Clerk's office, this is Leanne.
Leanne, yeah, you're actually the person I need to talk to. Back on January 18th, a motion for a grand jury was given to you with Jim Benish. I'm just trying to see if there's any movement on that at all.
I have not heard anything back, but that's not uncommon because none of us have any communication with the grand jury.
Yeah,
So I don't know what I can tell you as far as finding out the status.
Well, of course, the normal procedure that we would be contacted at some point. I just didn't know if there's like a status, situation that goes through. It's at point A, point B. You know what I'm saying. Okay, all right. So
yeah, I'm the only people that regularly have contact with the grand jurors are jury administrators who process them when they show up for their sessions.
Okay.
But other than that, we have no idea.
do you have like a rough idea, and I'm not going to hold you to it, obviously, but a realistic time frame from your experience from the time that one's submitted? And I know that this particular one obviously has a list. It's quite substantial. There's a lot of stuff on it. But what is the average time frame?
To be perfectly honest with you, this is the first time I've had experience with a citizen sending in something for the grand jury's consideration, so I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm really sorry.
All right, no problem. I appreciate your help.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Sure thing. Bye-bye.
In the previous 3 videos, you saw and heard how the Hawaii grand jury quest began and progressed through the affidavit stage, the acceptance stage, and the presumed investigation stage. We also became aware of suspicions that the affidavit did not in fact get processed according to law or according to Supreme Court rules, nor according to the established rules of Judge Seabright's court. And finally, we have established the actual identity of at least 2, not including Seabright himself, culpable persons who not only did not perform their duties, but implicated the culpability of the Hawaii U.S. Attorney's Office and possibly the FBI itself. We have actually obtained evidence that these inactions exist, and now there has been a new discovery. It seems that Leon Abernathy, who is Judge Seabright's head clerk, is also listed as a contact for the Hawaii U.S. Attorney's Office. If this is true, it may be a violation of the separation of powers described in the U.S. Constitution, Articles 1, 2, and 3. We also discovered that Miss Abernathy's husband is an attorney that represents the Department of Treasury, the Hawaii division of the IRS. His name is David Anthony Abernathy. His occupation and associations are not easy to discover, as he is also known as D. Abernathy, Tony Abernathy, David Abernathy, Anthony Abernathy, and D. Anthony Abernathy. So now we have an Abernathy with close proximity connections to the Hawaii Judicial Branch, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the IRS. A personal connection like this would be a dream come true for anyone in the organized crime business. The only U.S. government connection affiliate not discovered yet is the FBI, but we're working on it. Records must be kept in all branches of the United States government. And the concealing or destruction of these records is a federal crime. The failure to properly process and record incoming or existing records by any court is also a crime punishable by 3 years in prison. The Seabright Court's inactions on a legal request for a grand jury causes a problem for U.S. citizens. If it were not for the recordings, records, and emails kept by Code 4 Publishing and the exposure given these records, no one would know that this grand jury request existed. It's a poor attempt by the court to stop an investigation. The efforts to stop the grand jury investigation are only a short-term delay of the process. Code 4 Publishing is bewildered, and so am I at this point, as to explain why Seabright would risk his career on the likes of the 60 listed defendants in the affidavit, who are all small fry with the exception of the Hawaii Community Foundation. Does not Seabright and, of course, his clerks remember signing the delivery receipts for the documents? Do they not know of the recorded voicemails left by clerks that they have possession of these documents and are preparing to destroy them and later process them at my insistence? Is not Seabright aware of the letter sent by his court to me threatening to destroy the records? With all this looming over the heads of these people, one can only assume that they either believe they have total immunity or impunity, or they are prepared to go down with the ship to protect someone or some entity. It certainly is not an exercise to protect the U.S. citizens and the Constitution they are sworn to do. Even getting rid of me will not eradicate their culpability. As irony would have it, in answer to a legal request for the documents that relate to the affidavit I turned in and all relevant communication with the U.S. Attorney's Office and or FBI was denied by the court. Their reason? They claim they are exempt from the FOI federal law and they are forbidden to give any information relative to a grand jury. And their claim for exclusion is supported by a list of previous court decisions and opinions. So Seabright's court is claiming protection from revealing information about this affidavit, and this protection is based on grand jury statutes relative to releasing information about a sitting grand jury. When it comes down to it, it seems that the court cannot prove that they have even processed such a grand jury request. If you believe an email sent by Leon Abernathy that she did not process the request, but instead made a phone call to a person whose identity she doesn't remember. Judge Seabright's court failed the test. What are they going to do if I go to a higher court? What are they going to do if I request a personal communication with Seabright's grand jury or request a change in venue? Then what, Judge Seabright? Is the corruption so deep that it matters not? All I want to do is reopen an investigation into the murder of 4-year-old Lacey Ruff. After viewing the first 3 videos, you should have a fairly good understanding of the botched murder investigation of 4-year-old Lacey Ruff by the Kauai Police Department and the involvement of the state of Hawaii justice system in allowing or enabling the flawed investigators' work to proceed through the system in that enabled the incarceration of Aaron Shawlaw, not the incarceration of his brother Todd, who later admitted his participation in the crime. It was my reasoning that my conquest for a renewed investigation into the murder of Lacey Ruff would probably require the bypassing of local authorities. There was a bad smell about all this. It now appears that I was more than correct. I had already formally requested investigations by the Kauai Police Department, the Hawaii Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the FBI, and received no positive results. If local authorities would not cooperate, the next step is naturally to request a federal grand jury's involvement, and to do that would be necessary to include federal charges, and hence the whole investigation would be an exclusive federal jurisdiction investigation. My allegation that there was an accomplice in the murder of Lacey Woolsey Ruff is a federal murder violation, but it's also a state of Hawaii murder violation. I fear that my request for a federal grand jury to look into only the Ruff murder would be rejected and passed down to the state level authorities and or even a local grand jury. This option would most likely go nowhere. There were too many local authorities who were mixed up in this. As luck would have it, there were local Hawaiian citizens who were aware of my work on this murder and came forward with their own intelligence allegations of political corruption. I reasoned, why not include these allegations and then ask for a federal grand jury? I determined that there were good allegations of violations in the voices of these people of the federal RICO Act, as well as lesser federal violations. The first case I listed in my affidavit as allegations of violation of the RICO Act is the Jack Staley case. This allegation of violations of the RICO Act is an interesting case, and it is an in-depth example of alleged corruption in Hawaii and a clear example of alleged money laundering. On or about January 27, 2012, a resident of Kauai, Jack Lee Staley, died. Kauai police were notified and they entered the home on a welfare check by crawling into an unlocked window because the doors were locked and they couldn't get in from the outside. The police discovered the body of Jack Staley, and items were removed from the house by the Kauai Police Department without a search warrant. Police records indicate that items taken for safekeeping, they said, and some of these items were legal documents. The family is also alleging that some of the items taken were will and trust agreements. This was confirmed by a partial copy of the Kauai Police Department evidence log that was given to the Staley family after the entry into Jack's home. The will and trust agreement taken for safekeeping was created, witnessed, and implemented by a local attorney named Nancy Jo Budd, who is a private attorney specializing in will and trust agreements. She is also a member of the Hawaii Board of Education, general advisor to the Hawaii Community Foundation, a nonprofit corporation, and served on the advisory committee for the Hale Opio Kauai, Inc. She also worked for the First Hawaiian Bank with another notable attorney, Catherine Lloyd. You'll hear about her later. Both Lloyd and Budd deny they were colleagues, but Internet records disagree with them. While in those capacities, Miss Budd also represented the deceased Jack Staley in will and trust matters. It was Nancy Jo Budd who implemented the designation of the Hawaii Community Foundation as a recipient of 50% of Jack Staley's assets in the newly created trust fund. In doing so, all of the stipulations in the previous Staley fund were negated. The Jack Staley items taken from the deceased home were booked into the Kauai Police Department evidence by Officer Gilbert V. Ashian and Patrolman Patty Ramson. And when the items were returned to the family, the Staley family noted that one of the items returned was Jack Staley's new will and trust agreement. The previous will and trust agreement was missing from Jack Staley's belongings. The Staley family told me that their father's will and trust had been altered to reflect changes in the addition of the Hawaii Community Foundation as recipient of half of the trust funds. Although it's entirely possible that Jack Staley authorized the change in this agreement, The Staley family adamantly believes that it's not probable that he would have made such a change without notifying the affected members of the family. It's also interesting to note that the only person other than the deceased who had detailed knowledge of the new trust were the people ultimately benefited from the changes. The Staley family, specifically Joyce Staley and her brother Jeff, alleged that the will and trust documents returned to them by the KPD after the death of their father was notarized by attorney Nancy J. Butt, but was not witnessed, and that Robert Silverman and his wife Lolly, who are Kauai residents and were friends of Jack Staley, were present shortly after Mr. Staley died and witnessed the entry into the home of Jack Staley by the Kauai Police Department. Later, a copy of a notarized trust agreement surfaced. Joe Moss associate Lynette M. Madrano Stein, who is a colleague of Joe Moss, notarized this particular will and trust agreement. Jack Staley's signature on the new trust agreement could not be verified nor disputed. One important thing to note about this whole thing is that when the police entered Mr. Staley's home, they found a trust agreement. It was not witnessed. And so, after his death, and after the trust agreement was removed from the home, it shows up witnessed, which means the signatures of Jack Staley were not witnessed until after his death, or it would be on the copy that was left on the table before he died, would it not? Joyce Staley stated that she and her brother lived in Oregon and initially relied on information about their father's death provided by the Robert Silverman and his wife. Silverman and Jack Staley were friends because Silverman owned a tavern that Jack Staley frequented. Joyce Staley said that Lolly Silverman emailed her and said that when her husband Robert entered the home at the time the police were present on the day Jack Staley's body was found, he, Robert Silverman, looked at the will and trust documents lying on the table, and he noted that it was not the same document that he was familiar with. Joyce Staley was told by Lolly Silverman that on the day her husband Robert entered the home of Jack Staley with the Kauai police, that he also saw the body of Jack Staley, and that it was bruised, battered, and bloody, and that there were will and trust documents lying on the table in the home of Staley, as he said before. Jeff Staley said that when he arrived at his father's home 4 days later, the interior of the home had been completely searched. The home was in disarray, and there was a substance that resembled a black powder, the same type that you might see when used to lift fingerprints, throughout the home, as well as the presence of yellow evidence tape. The Jack Staley autopsy does not describe any unusual or suspicious injuries on the body of Jack. The Staley family believes that Nancy Jo Budd orchestrated the changes to the will and trust agreement of Jack Staley, while at the same time was the legal advisor and trustee treasurer to the Hawaii Community Foundation under the direction of another Kauai attorney, Catherine Lloyd. There's Catherine Lloyd again. Catherine Lloyd, at the same time of the death of Jack Staley, was the general counsel and vice president of the Hawaii Community Foundation and was employed also as general counsel to the First Hawaiian Bank. Joyce Staley said that the results of this action ultimately resulted in the Hawaii Community Foundation's assuming control of the Jack Staley Trust Fund. Lloyd, who later represented the Hawaii Community Foundation in an Oregon litigation, argued that Jeff Staley and Jack Staley's son could not be impartial administrators and should not be designated as trust administrators because of their relationship to their father. The Oregon court ruled in favor of the Hawaii Community Foundation and agreed that the Staleys should not be the trust administrator. At the suggestion of Lloyd, Jack Staley's longtime friend Robert Silverman was appointed as the new trust administrator. At either Lloyd's or Budd's suggestion, the trust's legal counsel was to be Joe Moss, the local attorney. Incidentally, Joe Moss has an office right next door to Robert Silverman's bar known as Rob's Good Times Grill. It has been learned that a man whose name is Victor Lane frequents Rob's Good Times Grill. Mr. Lane owns a cleaning business, and his business office is, imagine this, next door to Nancy Budd's office. The Staley family alleges that it was Mr. Lane who initiated the contact between Jack Staley and Nancy Budd. Now here's where it gets interesting, because remember in court, Lloyd argued with the judge that the Staley family couldn't be impartial, but they could be, apparently, and recommended that they appoint a person that supposedly is an impartial person by the name of Silverman. The CEO of the Hawaii Community Foundation is Kelvin H. Takata, who is also associated with the American Savings Bank. He happens to be on the board of directors. He's also on the board of directors of the company that supplies the electricity to the island of Kauai. Now, Kelvin's bank immediately benefited from the death of Jack Staley and Bud's new will when $336,900 of the Staley Trust was deposited at the direction of the newly appointed trust administrator Robert Silverman, with, of course, the blessing of attorney Joe Moss. In addition to the fact that Nancy Jo Budd and Catherine Lloyd were colleagues at the Hawaii Community Foundation, Catherine Lloyd's husband, Hugh Jones, is an attorney at the Hawaii Attorney General's office and specializes in the tax and charity division. Imagine that. In this capacity, Jones formally denies any professional association between his wife, Catherine Lloyd, and Nancy Jo Budd. Catherine Lloyd has since abruptly terminated her employment with the Hawaii Community Foundation, no doubt at the advisement of her husband. Copies of certified checks indicated that the new administrator, Silverman, also received immediately $25,000 of the Staley Trust funds as the administrator. Now, he was not listed as a beneficiary of the trust before. Copies of certified checks also indicate that immediately after Robert Silverman assumed the position of administrator of the Jack Staley Trust Fund, another $227,000 deposit was made into the American Savings Bank. Of course, the board of directors, Kevin Takata, who is also the CEO of the Hawaii Community Foundation, where Catherine Lloyd works. Another $269,000 was transferred to the Hawaii Community Foundation. This legal maneuvering removed all control of the Jack Staley inheritance from the deceased family directly over to the Hawaii Community Foundation. They will deny this, but you can see based on what I've just said, that's true. They are in control. The Staley family filed a complaint with no one else other than the Hawaii Attorney General's office, and immediately received an email from Hugh Jones, who is Catherine Lloyd's husband. Jones responded to the complaint via his hawaii.gov email, hughjones@hawaii.gov. Jones says this to Jeff Staley: "I'm sorry missed your references to Miss Lloyd in your prior email because it was read on another phone after normal working hours. You are correct. Miss Lloyd is my spouse. For that reason, your July 2013 complaint was assigned to a different attorney in our department with expertise in charitable oversight matters. I was not involved whatsoever thereafter. I do need to correct a couple of your statements. First, Ms. Lloyd was not terminated by the Hawaii Community Foundation, but left to take a new position with Hawaii Pacific University, and she left Hawaii Community Foundation before the date of your complaint. Nor is Miss Lloyd related in any way to Miss Budd. The Staley family has received no further communication from the Hawaii Attorney General's office or the Kauai Police Department in response to their complaints, nor does the Staley family have any information as to the status of their complaints. The legal advisor to Mr. Silverman and the Staley Trust Fund, Joe Moss, also served as bylaw chair of the Kauai United Way. The Jack Staley Will and Trust documents created by Nancy Jo Budd and dated 6/28/11 is witnessed by a person named Lynette Madrano Stein, who is also on the staff of Joe Moss at the Kauai United Way and was a witness on the Staley Will Trust agreement created by Budd. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how all these little charitable, quote, associations work in the world, but this is a particular example in Hawaii. They pass money back and forth to each other. To me, that's washing money. To them, that's just money management. The Hawaii Community Foundation is listed as a contributor to the Kauai United Way, where Joe Moss is associated. Once the Staley Trust money is contributed to the Hawaii Community Fund, it's washed clean. It's clean money. It's almost impossible to determine where the money transferred to the Hawaii Community Fund and then goes to any other entity where it originated from once the money is transferred. So imagine this: you put $500 in the bank. In this case, it would be the Hawaii Community Foundation, and the bank says, "Okay, I owe person X, person Y, and person Z $500. Now I have the money to pay them, and I pay them." And so you go to the bank and you say, "Wait a minute, that's my money. You paid them people." And the bank says, "No, you can't. That's not your money. That money came out of our general fund. Your money is already in the general fund, but we don't know that that's your money." That's how they justify what they're doing. So once the money goes to the Hawaii Community Fund, which is a central hub, a central foundation that distributes and receives money back and forth from all these foundations and all these contributors, it's a big mess, and anyone who thinks they can go in there and audit the books and definitively determine whose money is what is mistaken. It just would be almost impossible. Joy Staley said that her father did not have any known life-threatening health issues, and that her father's personal doctor was actually surprised by his death and said he was not notified of Mr. Staley's death. In addition, Joy Staley stated that she feared that her father's death might not be a natural death. The Staley family was provided with a partial evidence log list that indicated that a will and trust agreement was in fact removed from the Staley home, but it was not informed of her father's cause of death, nor were they provided with any other police investigation reports. Ms. Staley also said that no Kauai police investigation files have been released to the family, nor has any information as to the cause of her father's death been released to them. However, I received a response to a Freedom of Information request I filed with the police department for the records on the Staley death investigation, if there was one. And I did receive the autopsy report. The autopsy report states that Jack Staley's death was due to a ruptured aortic aneurysm. And as I said before, there was no indication of any other harmful events that might have happened to him recently. In an effort to validate the beliefs and allegations of Jeff or George Staley, I inquired as to the possibility of accessing past email or text communications that Father Jack Staley may have had with culpable persons such as Lloyd Budd or Jones or any person associated with these two lawyers. The Staleys provided me with the Yahoo email address of Jack Staley and the password to his email, and there was a Yahoo account. After gaining access into Jack Staley's email, I discovered that the account had been tampered with. It appeared as if the mail account had been terminated and then reinitiated using the same exact email address of the original Jack Staley email. And the reason I believe this is because when I opened up the first email that was in this new email account, I see a welcome sign from Yahoo. And this was sent after Jack Staley's death. Joy and Jeff Staley were asked about this email termination, and I was told by Jeff Staley that he nor any member of the Staley family had changed their father's email account with Yahoo or other than changing the password, and did not instigate the forming of a new account that resulted in the email history to become unavailable or deleted. Jeff Staley stated that he had possession of his father's cell phone and the laptop computer that belonged to him. Jack Staley died on January 27, 2012, and the interruption and replacement of his email account was accomplished on June 26, the next year, 2013. There was no access to the original older Jack Staley email account. I sent an email to Yahoo to Security Division inquiring as to why the Jack Staley email did not contain any previous account history dated prior to the date of his death. I got no response. In my affidavit to the court and the grand jury, I reminded them of the following. Nancy Jo Budd and Catherine Lloyd allegedly were former colleagues in the Hawaii Community Foundation. Nancy Jo Budd was listed on an internet publication as an advisor, trustee, treasurer to the Hawaii Community Foundation under the direction of Catherine Lloyd, and Catherine Lloyd under the direction of Kelvin Takata, the CEO of the Hawaii Community Foundation. Takata is also on the board of directors, as I said before, of the American Savings Bank that received the first funds and continues to receive them from the Staley Trust Fund. Nancy Budd was on the Community Advisory Committee of the Hale Opio Kauai that received donations from the Kauai United Way as well as the Hawaii Community Foundation. In addition to other colleagues of Lloyd and Budd at the Kauai United Way are our friend Joe Moss, director of the Kauai United Way, and is the Jack Staley Administrator's legal counsel to Robert Silverman. As such, Silverman and Joe Moss are in position to influence and actually control the trust distributions. Associates of Budd at the Hale Opio Kauai Inc. are notable people like Kauai Police Chief Darrell Perry, previous Kauai prosecuting attorney Shailene Carvalho, Justin Collar, present prosecuting attorney, who all would have been involved in an investigation, if there was one, into the death of Jack Staley. I also advised the court and the jury that to date these entities or their respective county divisions have not contacted the Staley family in response to their inquiries, except to return the new will and trust agreements retrieved from the home of Jack Staley. Catherine Lloyd was employed by the First Hawaiian Bank at the time of the death of Jack Staley, and her past associate there is a man called Benjamin Benzaken, who is an investment advisor for the bank and also for Jack Lee Staley. Imagine that. Additional trusts known to be controlled with or associated with the First Hawaiian Bank are the Bishop Street Capital Management, the First Hawaii Foundation, and the Bank West Services, Inc. Bank West. Now that's a big one. Benjamin Benzaken was described by Joe Staley as a good friend of Jack Staley's. I did a telephone interview with Mr. Benzaken, and he really didn't want to talk to me about anything. He didn't provide any information other than he did not want to be quoted in any way. And he did say that he was a good friend of Jack Staley's and was surprised that he had died. Other than that, Benzaken was cautious and told me that any involvement in this by him might jeopardize his license to practice his profession. So he was nervous, very nervous. Why? He doesn't even know what I was going to ask him. I suppose he can imagine, though. Catherine Lloyd has denied any professional association with Ms. Budd, except to infer that Ms. Budd was a volunteer for the Hawaii Community Foundation. In an email from Nancy Budd, though, she tends to contradict Ms. Lloyd and describes her professional position with the Hawaii Community Foundation as this, quote, "My association with the Hawaii Community Foundation has been purely a professional one over many years. Most professional advisors in Hawaii have such an association as served, like I am, on the Hawaii Community Foundation Leadership Council, not on a board of directors or board of governors or any other entity related to the Hawaii Community Foundation that would require acting as a fiduciary." So, okay, she says she wasn't a fiduciary, but she was a professional advisor, which is contrary to what Lloyd says. Now, Budd continues. She acknowledges she may have misspoke. Quote, "I may possibly have caused some confusion by including my participation as a member of the Leadership Council on a disclosure related to my volunteer service on the Board of Directors, Board of Education for the state of Kauai. Hawaii Community Foundation has set up a leader council on each island to discuss overall trends and needs in the community. Okay, so Bud's padding her statement a little bit, but she's mistaken. She's assuming that I received this information from the Board of Education. I've never contacted the Board of Education. I got the information from information she put on file with the Hawaii Bar Association, wherein she has to list the organizations that she belongs to and what positions she holds. So she's telling me here she didn't really do much at the Hawaii Community Foundation, but she's telling the Bar Association another story.
One of my favorite, more recent experiences was with a client who had really been alienated from his family. His wife had died several years prior. He was an older man, and he really spent most of his time in a bar in Lihue, and that was where he had his support group, and that's where he really wanted to leave a legacy. And his legacy was to set up a chair in the bar and allow every person who walked into the bar who was first in that chair to have a free drink. It was just an interesting conversation because we were able to talk about whether he had a larger interest in supporting the community in other ways. And it was to take care of young people on the island of Kauai, support them in athletic endeavors and that sort of thing. So when we started that conversation, I could just see him kind of lighten up. He was very excited. He came back in the next day after we had signed everything, and he just told me, I am so happy that I'm doing this, to know that that fund now is in place, and he would be just absolutely delighted about that.
So, although initially Bud seemed to infer that she was more than just a volunteer at the Hawaii Community Foundation, Catherine Lloyd of the Hawaii Community Foundation adamantly denies this. She and Lloyd had a close professional relationship in the implementation of the Jack Lee Staley Will and Trust Agreement because Lloyd was the counsel for the Hawaii Community Foundation, and as such was the Hawaii Community Foundation representative in court during Staley's legal contest of the Staley Trust created by Nancy Budd that granted a 50% interest to the company that Lloyd works for, crying out loud. So Budd doesn't mention this when she's denying her relationship with Lloyd. And you and I, whoever's watching this, knows that both of them are trying to separate each other. And the reason they're trying to separate each other is because just based on this little bit of information, they're walking a fine line of legality. There are internet records that indicate Nancy Jo Budd has been on an advisory board for the Hale Opio Kauai, Inc., another nonprofit corporation, and that the Hawaii Community Foundation and the United Way, wherein Joe Moss is listed as a previous United Way board of directors, and both are listed as donors to the same foundation, the Hale Opio Kauai, Inc. Now, these foundations could not accomplish the things that I'm inferring that they do in this without having help from outside sources. And so when you research the organizations, as I did, and you start looking at who's who and picking up names and comparing and all of that, you find many of the same people belong or advise or have some connection to the same foundations that Bud and Lloyd are involved with. That being said, when you start looking at, okay, what kind of people are they recruiting or seeking out to help them do what they need to do, which is take money from private trust funds. On the advisory board of the Hale Opio Kauai, Inc. are notable Mayor Bernard Carvalho, who is listed as having served on the board of directors of the Hawaii United Way also, with Police Chief Darrell Perry and Shailene Carvalho, the past prosecutor, all who served on the Hawaii Board of Education with Bud, and Justin Kohler, the Kauai prosecutor. So why are they denying association with each other? Kauai is a small island, granted, and you would expect them to be bumping into each other. But when you start questioning them, they don't know nothing about nothing. I've heard that over 20 years, and when anyone ever tells me that, I know something's up. It is alleged that Nancy Jo Budd, Catherine Lloyd, and Joe Moss, all attorneys, have personally benefited financially from the death of Jack Staley and his subsequent estate, and accordingly the Hawaii Community Foundation and other nonprofit organizations that receive and distribute donations to and from each other have benefited or will benefit as a result of hundreds of thousands of dollars that become available to them via the Jack Staley will and his trust. These funds are to be transferred to the Hawaii Community Foundation via the First Hawaiian Bank. And in fact, there have been immediate transfers of the Staley funds that diverted to the Hawaii Community Foundation and directly into the American Savings Bank that is owned by our buddy Kelvin Takata, who also chairs the Hawaii Community Foundation. So as the chairman of the board of the Hawaii Community Foundation, do you imagine that Kelvin Takata might have a say in what money comes in and what money goes out? And by the way, Kelvin Takata has resigned his position. Not immediately, it's been recently, but still, maybe he saw the writing on the wall. I don't know. All of the named persons have participated in some way, either directly or indirectly, with the proceeds of the Jack Staley estate. Nancy Jo Budd's position with the Hail Opio Kauai, Inc. nonprofit corporation put her in a position to become associated with contributors, the same contributors I just spoke of earlier, the mayor, the prosecutors, the police chief. All of those are also associated with CAIL. So you can see that there's an ability there for all of these foundations, should somebody start checking into them and questioning, they have the ability to circle the wagons from the wagon train. Now remember when I said there was civil litigation in Oregon over this, the Staley family took Bud and Lloyd, it apparently appears, to court to dispute the changes in their father's will. And as I said before, the court agreed with Catherine Lloyd, that there was a degree of partisanship should one of the family members be appointed trust administrator. I've been involved in trust before, and it's usually a family member in there as the administrator or their attorney. But accordingly, the legal counsel appointed to represent the trust and advise Robert Silverman is Joe Moss. Now, who has a bigger conflict of interest or partisanship than Joe Moss, who also is a director of the Kauai United Way and in position to receive funds from the trust? Now, in case the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office in Hawaii wants to pull my affidavit out of their trash basket now and take another look at this, I'm going to restate the relationships involved in this Jack Staley case and post pictures in case somebody might want to go get an arrest warrant for these people. Catherine Lloyd, beginning with Catherine Lloyd, what is or was the Hawaii Community Foundation General Counsel. She was on the worked for the First Hawaiian Bank. She is Vice President and Deputy Manager, Trust and Investment of the Hawaii Pacific University. And Lloyd had a direct involvement in the replacement of Jeff Staley as a trust administrator, and stated in a letter to Jeff Staley, quote, It's clear the interest of Jeff L. Staley as beneficiary conflicts his duties as trustee to deal impartially with all the beneficiaries, unquote. But Bud Lloyd doesn't say, hey, it's okay that Joe Moss goes over there and helps himself to the funds. Nancy Jo Budd is a colleague of Catherine Lloyd at the Hawaii Community Foundation, Inc., two people working for the same company that received the money, was the legal advisor to Jack Lee Staley, and created the deceased's new will and trust agreement that replaced the old one and granted a 50% interest to the Hawaii Community Foundation that didn't exist before. She is a colleague of the mayor, Bernard Carvalho, Darrell Perry, Kauai Police Chief, Russell Gu, Office of Hawaii Attorney General, Shailene Cervajo, former Kauai prosecutor, William Arkeki, Hawaii Department of Education, Justin Kohler, Kauai prosecutor, and all at the Hale Aupio Kauai, Inc. Okay, last but not least, Bud is also a colleague of attorney Joe Moss, we know this, who represents Robert Silverman, and Bud implemented the will and trust designed by her for Jack Staley. Now, Moss, who is an advisor, is paid by the Staley Trust and is also affiliated with the Kauai United Way that receives funds on a regular basis from the Hawaii Community Foundation. One thing we don't know is if Moss receives money directly from the Kauai United Way for holding his position. If he does, then that's an important link, but it's not that important as far as this goes. Bud is also a colleague of Catherine Lloyd, who denies this, and was previous general counsel for the Hawaii Community Fund, a nonprofit corporation, and worked for the First Hawaiian Bank. Bud is also a colleague of Catherine Lloyd, who denies this, and Lloyd was previous general counsel for the Hawaii Community Foundation, a nonprofit corporation, and worked with Bud at the First Hawaiian Bank. Next we have a gentleman we haven't talked about, and this guy's name is Bradley G. Perrys. I don't know a whole lot about him, but the word on the street is that Brad Perrys is the stepson of Jack Staley and was left out of the original Jack Staley will and trust. Because of that, it's alleged that Perrys threatened Jack Staley's life when he found out he had been excommunicated from the will. And the reason I'm bringing this up at all is because Perrys was the person who was found inside of Jack Staley's residence after the body was removed. I wonder why. Joyce Staley stated that her father once told her, quote, "If anything happens to me, Perrys did it." Okay, U.S. Attorney, we're getting close to the hen house here. The next one is Hugh Jones, Deputy Attorney General of Hawaii in the Tax Division, and Miss Lloyd's husband and past colleague of Nancy Budd at the Hawaii Bar Association. Whoa! He's also a colleague of Chief Perry, Chief of Police, and Bernard Carvalho, the mayor, and Shailene Carvalho, the prosecutor, and said he recused himself from the investigation into his wife, Catherine Lloyd. What investigation? Another name that's here that we haven't reviewed, but I'm going to mention it anyway because some people later on might be interested in this gentleman. His name is David M. Louie, Hawaii. He is the former Attorney General of Hawaii, having served a 4-year term from 2011 to 2014. Now this would be during the time that all this was going on with the Staley stuff. So any complaints about activities on nonprofit corporations and foundations maybe should have passed his desk. As Attorney General, he was the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the Hawaii, providing advice, counsel, and representation to the governor and the state legislature and employees. guess what? He's a colleague of Hugh Jones and did not investigate the Staley allegations involving persons named in the affidavit. He is currently in private practice. His office is in the First Hawaiian Bank building. The next person is Lynette Madruno Stein. And she, to me, is interesting because I had a hard time finding any information on her. But once you know exactly who she is and where she's been around and who she's hanging around with, it's pretty easy to find stuff with her. And I actually did find a photo of her, which I'll be posting. Stein's a colleague of Joe Moss. We know that because she signed as witness to the trust agreement created by Bud. She's also a colleague of Moss at the United Way, the Hawaii United Way. Stein is campaign development manager and community liaison for none other than the Hawaii Community Foundation, and also represents the Kauai United Way. Goodness. Back to Joe Moss. In my opinion, with all this information, he's in it pretty deep. We know he's an attorney and was the bylaws chairman for the United Way, but he's also a per diem judge in the 5th District Family Courts, for crying out loud, and represents Robert Silverman, the current trustee of the Jack Staley Trust Fund, and is also past director of the Kauai United Way. He is a colleague of Nancy Budd. Budd has provided him with the Staley will and the trust agreement, and is also a colleague of Catherine Lloyd. Goodness again. We're back to Benjamin Benzachem, whose nickname is Ben. At first appearance, he's kind of to me, was kind of a innocent bystander until he lied to me. That makes me want to know more. He was the financial advisor for Jack Staley and wouldn't say much when I talked to him. And Joyce Staley says that Mr. Benzachem worked with Mrs. Budd at the First Hawaiian Bank. Mr. Benzachem admits he worked at the First Hawaiian Bank, but denies that he knew Budd and says he never worked with her. Now, after he told me that, I did a little research, and it does look like Bud worked at First Hawaiian Bank, but Bud also claims she didn't work there. Now, if you are involved in a money laundering scheme, and it comes out that you work for the bank who was the first person to receive the money before it's washed, of course you're going to deny anything to do with that bank. Of course. So, that being said, we're not going to forget about Mr. Benzachem. Now, last but not least is Robert Silverman. He looks like he's just a guy owns a bar, associates with everybody that comes into the bar, have a big party. I mean, that's what bars are about. They form big family groups that come in there all the time. And so that's where some of these associations apparently were the closest. But that's only a peripheral look at Mr. Silverman. As recently as yesterday, I received some information that would indicate that Mr. Silverman and his wife Lolly are complicated. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to release any more information about these two now, but it's going to come out in the next video. This guy is going to be a person that I'm going to hone in on, especially his wife, for more information. Because when you have a lot to lose, sometimes you'll go to extreme measures to protect it. Okay, so the second case is a large, convoluted mess of legal finaglings that will make you want to stand up and not watch this video anymore. Dr. Leonard Horowitz and his partner Sherry Kane are the victims in this next case that I've listed as case number 2 in my affidavit. Leonard Horowitz is the world's most celebrated pharmaceutical industry whistleblower, and he's YouTube's most popular, prolific, controversial doctor. He's a leading humanitarian, a political activist, and a Harvard-trained medical expert and documentary filmmaker, and author of 17 books, including 3 American bestsellers. So he's no lightweight. His works have moved nations to rethink vaccinations and sourced the Muslim world's opposition to intelligence agencies' operations into global immunization programs. Dr. Horowitz's greatest lifetime achievement, he says, is the discovery of his perfect circle of sound. His revelations of 9 core creative frequencies have been revolutionizing the music and natural healing industries as well as water science. In his latest publication, the Book of 528, Dr. Horowitz massively evidences his theory that the 528 Hz frequency of sound must be considered the clear channel broadcast of love. Ms. Sherry Kane has been associated with Dr. Horowitz and has been his friend, confidant, and administrative assistant for 8 years. Both are what I would call true constitutionalists and have been deemed enemies of the state for years. They have endured the seizure of their property in Hawaii, thanks to Mr. Sulla, have been dragged into court only to see their case dropped before court appearances, and have suffered through the filing of bankruptcy proceedings resulting from legal fees and associated imposed court judgments and fees. Both allege their constitutional rights have been violated by the corruption within the Hawaiian circuit courts, and I agree with them. After hearing the details of their case, I believe that they too are entitled to their day in court. And not just a day in court that occurs in the state of Hawaii today, but a true, honest day in court based on facts and recommendation as recommended by the federal grand jury. I believe their story, and I think you will also. Their lives in Hawaii have succumbed to prolific, profound, and almost unbelievable private lawyers and their dubious legal finagling, and the acceptance of all of this by all of the Hawaiian circuit courts that viewed the case. I had to read over their explanation of what was going on 4 or 5 times to get a grip on the finagling, the legal finagling that went on before me and was visible on the sheets of paper that I read. Based on their allegations that were supported with fact, they were the second victims listed in my affidavit to the court. Their case is much too entwined in legalities to explain it in total detail, so I'm going to spare you that. But as best as I can do, this is the story as recorded in the affidavit. Summary. It's been a year now, and their battle still continues. It just won't stop for them. And I take my hat off to them for being so diligent in protecting their rights. But now it's time that other people get involved. Hence, I'm telling you about their case. On January 15, 2004, Horowitz, via his organization, the Royal Bloodline of David, purchased the subject property from a man named Cecil Loran, who was represented by his attorney, Mr. Paul Sulla. The purchase price was for $550,000, and it was escrowed by the Island Title Company, also known now as the First American Title Company, and the title guaranteed by the Stewart Title Company. Now, Stewart Title Company is a large, reputable company. Later, Horowitz learned that there were 3 liens on the property that weren't indicated in any of the title information. The title insurance policy that Stewart Title did not reveal these liens on the property. The property is approximately 17 acres, and the liens that showed up, and I'm not real clear on how they came to light. I think they came to light when the actual title transfer was looming. The federal government had an $85,000 lien against Mr. Lee on this property. And so did Philip Mays, who was a realtor involved in the transaction. And he actually had litigation to come up with this lien for nearly $225,000. And I guess his lien was on behalf of a mortgage. I don't know what that was about. Right now I don't. The issue is Horowitz thought he was buying a piece of property that was lien-free for over $500,000, and when he goes to close on the deal, there's liens on it. He can't get a clear title. So the money apparently was in the hands, or at least partially in the hands of the title company. On February 21st, 2008, 4 years later, and after going back and forth through the civil courts and everything, Horowitz is actually awarded a $200,000 jury award in favor of his company, the Royal Bloodline, because Paul Sella, who represented Lee, committed fraud. Imagine that. So the jury said, okay, we'll give you $200,000. But Horowitz didn't get the $200,000. So later, and I'll explain to it later, he uses that award as a partial payment, and I would too, wouldn't you? If they owed me that money, that's the same as cash. You just have to collect it. On February 27th, 6 days later, Horowitz, through his company, the Royal Blood, pays off the $550,000 total mortgage to Lee using the $200,000 jury award as a partial payment. So he paid $350,000 of his own money. And in addition to that, he pays off the other liens, the $85,000 and the $225,000. So he's already paid more money than he bargained for when he bought it, with the exception of the $200,000 jury award. Now, the problem is exasperated now, because once he does this, Sella and Lee refuse to release the mortgage and give him the title again. On April 20th, 2009, Paul Sella, is claiming his lien rights to the property and tries to foreclose on the property by using other fraud tactics, i.e. documents. And it appears that he's trying to represent himself in this matter, not Lee. He's trying to surpass Lee and get this property himself. He smells blood, in other words. But remember, even if Sella can foreclose on the property, which he can't legally, he doesn't have the title to the property. Lee does. So it's interesting to see how he goes about getting this title. And by the way, Lee is dying of cancer. His days are limited. So I'm sure Sella views this as a time to get desperate, because he's got to make things happen pretty fast, or this property is liable to go into some kind of an escrow to be decided by the courts on who actually owns it, who doesn't. So on May 15th, it's about a week after he finds out that Lee is going to die, he forms another corporation. Sella does. And he calls it the Office of the Foreseer. He claims it's a corporate soul. Now, that's some kind of legal terminology for meaning the corporation has something to do with humanity. and he gets his hands on a drifter named Jason Lister, or Jason Hester, who's probably wandering around the beaches in Hawaii, and makes this guy the agent for his new company, the officer of the foreseer. Why did he do that? Well, because he's an attorney, and, you know, it's a little complicated for an attorney to walk into court and try to seize property in his own name. So that's his first step. Now, on May 15th, that same year, using what Horowitz says are forged document assignments of Horowitz's mortgage and notes to Mr. Lee, Sulla transfers interest in the property from Mr. Lee to Office of the Overseer, which is his new corporation. And it's been said that in order for Sulla to do this, he had to have a signature on a quitclaim deed, and he had to get it registered in Arizona, where Lee was on his deathbed. A good law enforcement agency could get to the bottom of that, but since I don't have subpoena power and all of that kind of stuff, I'm just putting that in here as a form of reference to the shenanigans that Paul Sulla can pull if he wants to. So on May 26th and 28th, 2009, Sulla faxes date-altered and signature-altered fraudulent incorporation articles to the Hawaii Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. On June 27, 2009, the original owner of the property, Mr. Lee, dies. And he dies, and Horowitz still doesn't have title to the property, and the only one that can, in his mind, that can give it to him is Lee. But now, Sulla thinks the property's in the name of his new company, and he doesn't acknowledge Horowitz's previous payments to Lee because, in his mind, it's his property. And if Horowitz wants to give his money to someone who doesn't own the property, that's fine, but he's not going to give title to the property. Horowitz makes a claim to the title company. I would too. On June 9th, 2011, Jason Hester, the surfer boy, or whatever it is he is, signs a quitclaim deed of the property to Sulla personally. The miracle has happened. This deed was prepared by Sulla, who also claimed he made a $50,000 loan to this drifter, Hester, secured by a mortgage on this property. And Horowitz says he did that because now he's got foreclosure rights. Now this is where it gets a little confusing to me, but I think Sulla's covering his bases, because if he can't end up with a legal title to this property, the last resort would be that $50,000 mortgage that he holds on the property that he loaned on it as a lender. He's no longer a property owner at that point, he's a lender, and so I need my $50,000. I think that's the way this was panning out. On September 19th, 2012, Horowitz dissolves his Royal Blood Company that was owned by he and his Sherry Kane. Now, although this is a very brief account of Sulla's attempt to basically steal the property, Miss Kane and Mr. Horowitz have suffered through a fraudulent attempt by Sulla to auction off the property for falsely claimed non-payment of the mortgage between Horowitz and Mr. Lee. Dr. Horowitz and Miss Kane have endured a successful criminal impersonation of Cecil Lee by Sulla, who allegedly impersonated Lee to file property transfer documents with the state that gave the property to Sulla's office of foreseer, and then claimed that his colleague Jason Hester was Lee's nephew, who therefore was also the last survivor and entitled to Lee's estate. So now he's going after Lee too. But investigation later proves that Hester has a closer relationship to Sulla than he ever did to Mr. Lee. Over the years of trying to take possession of property that Horowitz paid for, Sulla's their attempts to seek relief through the civil courts fell on deaf ears of judges, local police and prosecutors, and the state Hawaii Attorney General's office. They alleged fraud. They alleged fraud, and it's not a new or uncertain scenario to Paul Sulla, nor it is to me, because doesn't this sound familiar like the Staley case? Everyone's looking the other way when it comes to Paul Sulla or these foundations. I'm wondering if there's some kind of connection between Sulla and the foundations. I don't have one at this point, but it makes one think about it. In 2017, Hawaii judges, under supervision of Judge Michael Seabright, now we know who that man is, ordered the transfer of the Horowitz property to Paul Sulla, despite the property being listed as an asset in Horowitz bankruptcy proceedings. The Hawaii attorneys and judges who participated in this proper seizure from Horowitz are as follows. I'm going to do the same thing as I did for the Staley case, because just in case the FBI might get some pressure on them that, hey, you can't overlook this son of a bitch. Paul Sulla and attorney Dan O'Phelan were the original attorneys that represented Mr. Lee, who owned the property that Horowitz bought. Glenn Hara, who was the first attorney that Mr. Horowitz hired to represent him in litigation against Sulla, was later appointed as a judge, and then continually ruled against Horowitz and for Sulla. He should have recused himself. Hara was initially referred to Horowitz by the Island Title Company, who has since declined to honor the stipulations in their title insurance policy to Horowitz when the property was initially purchased. Then you have a man named, another attorney, John S. Carroll. Now, Mr. Carroll was hired by Horowitz when Glenn Hara was promoted to judge. Carroll's initial fees to Horowitz were $25,000. And under Carroll's direction, Horowitz got that $200,000 judgment award in damages. But guess what? Later, Judge Ibarra vacated the judgment. So now the plot thickens. Horowitz, who used that $200,000 judgment to effectively pay off the mortgage to Lee, doesn't have the $200,000 anymore. Then we have Judge Ibarra, who vacated the $200,000 judgment in favor of Horowitz at the request of Sulla, and continued ruling against Horowitz's legal actions. Okay, so Horowitz uses this $200,000 to pay off a mortgage to Lee, not to Sulla. But Sulla goes to court and tells the judge he doesn't want the judge to honor that judgment. Why? He's trying to get the property and has effectively already transferred title to his own name. Why should he give a shit about $200,000 of paper that was used to pay off a mortgage that he doesn't acknowledge? The only sense it makes is that Sulla's trying to get some more money that's not his. Only thing I can figure. But no matter what, it harms Horowitz and Kane. Somewhere down the road, that $200,000 might have to come up with. And now it's gone. Then we come to a man called Gary Victor Dubin, also an attorney in Hawaii. Where did he come up with these guys? Dubin was hired later by Horowitz at the recommendation of another attorney, Gary Zamber. Now, I'm not sure how Zamber got into this mix, but when Horowitz took Zamber's advice and hired Duman, he was unaware that Zamber, the giver of advice, was Paul Seller's law partner. Duman, the new attorney, promised Dr. Horowitz to combat Seller's attempts to seize the property worth over $1 million. He was paid an initial $6,000, but did nothing for Horowitz. Imagine that. And after Horowitz refused to pay Dubin another $25,000 or more, Horowitz finds out that Dubin goes back across the line and starts advising Sulla. I'm sorry to laugh, but this is not funny. It's just sad. Now, here's what we know about Dubin. Gary Dubin is no stranger to judicial corruption, to say the least. Dubin spent 19 and a half months in a California federal prison and returned to Hawaii in 1996 to practice law again. Now, the state of Hawaii's Office of Disciplinary Counsel, in an extremely unusual decision concerning a matter of moral turpitude, determined that the finding of professional misconduct by Durbin was not warranted. Later, even the U.S. Internal Revenue Service reversed itself, saying that Durbin didn't owe the $1.5 million that was the basis of his 3 misdemeanor convictions for failure to file tax returns. Well, all I can say about that is that the Hawaii Bar Association, in their minds, Dubin must be a Boy Scout. In fact, in the comment about the IRS forgiving the $1.5 million that they claimed was owed to them by Dubin, they gave him $100,000 in interest from payments from the earlier years. Gave him back the interest. So the IRS had found that he indeed had substantial business losses and deductions for the years in question, 19 and a half months, and that they could backdate the interest. Dubin says he can't recoup the time behind bars. And the same goes thus far for the $131,000 the judge fined him. So he was fined also. In 2006, the IRS looked into the possibility of crediting the fine that Dubin had to pay the courts to his next tax liability, but found it couldn't be done because the money went to the court. It gets better. Dubin claims that Judge Reel, who now, or is 84 or he's deceased, I'm not sure which, railroaded him 14 years ago. It is a rare federal judge who hasn't attracted some kind of complaints like this, but there have been many similar complaints about Rail. I think it's pronounced Reel, over 4 decades by plaintiffs, defendants, and lawyers alike, as well as appellate decisions occasionally attacking the judge's handling of cases. 3 times this year alone, cases have been similarly removed from Reel's docket. So there's something to be said about karma here. I don't think I need to tell you what it is. Now we go to another attorney by the name of Stephen Whitaker. Stephen Whitaker was co-counsel with Sulla against the Horowitz proceedings. And one day, Whitaker appears in court with a witness that's supposed to be Jason Hester. Horowitz says the guy wasn't Hester, he knows Hester. Apparently the judge didn't question it. Hester didn't have to take the stand and swear he was Jason Hester or whoever he was. didn't have to show identification or didn't have to do anything. So it's unknown whether or not the court actually identified this unknown person, but certainly took his testimony, I guess. Who was it? We don't know. He's never been seen or heard of again. So for now, that's the summary of Dr. Horowitz and Sherry Kane. It's much, much more complicated than what I have outlined here. Maybe what I've said here isn't always exactly correct the way it happened according to documents, but you get the picture. You get the picture of what's going on here. And I have to say this, is that when you, a citizen or anyone, ask a federal grand jury to investigate a crime, the facts presented to the jury don't have to be proven. They can be just rumors. Because it's the grand jury's job to decide what's real and what isn't. And they use, in the federal case, they use their advisors, usually one of the U.S. Attorney General or FBI or even the IRS, to help them weed through the legalities. So I don't want somebody commenting on this video saying you were incorrect in the spelling here, or this date was a month off, or something like that. Okay, it is. You got the idea. This is a summary, a basic explanation of what happened to the Staleys and the Canes. Now we're going to move on to the next person, the victim, who is also deceased, Mr. Stanley M. Zadalis. This is a third allegation of political and judicial corruption, and it involves another attempt by our friend Paul Sulla to seize trust funds designated to the deceased relatives upon the death of Stanley Zadalis. Between January 2013 to present, our friend Paul J. Sulla Jr. directed and conspired with two daughters of the deceased Stanley M. Zadalis to redirect approximately $200,000 from the Zadalis Trust and or estate from California to the First Hawaiian Bank in Hawaii. They love this bank. Why? It is alleged by the Zadalis family, who were the actual trust administrators, that Sulla and the two sisters, Marianne Jolin and Lillian Zadalis, committed forgery, fraud, and kidnapping to accomplish obtaining a certified check for $200,000 issued by the San Diego Credit Union. The check was in the name of an old dead trust established back in 2009, but the trust had been canceled. The real trust, was the Stanley M. Martha B. Zadalis Living Trust. It's alleged by Administrator Marcia Zadalis Mayer that when her two sisters learned of the canceled trust, they conspired to kidnap 89-year-old Stanley Zadalis, telling him they were going to fly him from New Mexico, where he had been living with his son, to Marianne Jolin's home, who's 69, in San Diego. Instead, when he arrived at the New Mexico airport, Taylor Jolin, the son of Marianne Jolin, put him on an airplane to Hawaii, where he soon after died in the home of Lillian Zadalis, who resides in Hawaii. Now, it's alleged that Marianne Jolin belongs to one of Paul Sulla's religious organizations, Sulla Religious, and as a member was recruited by Sulla as a client. After Stanley Zadalis died, the family desired to transport his body to the National Cemetery in North Carolina, where his wife was buried. But Paul Sulla petitioned the court to stop the transportation of the body and deceased, and demanded the court allow the body to be cremated in Hawaii. The court judge, Judge Hera, says, no, I'm not granting Sulla's request. Meanwhile, Sulla was trying to take control of the $200,000 brought to Hawaii by Marianne Jolin from San Diego. The actual trust administrator, William Patrick Zadalis, provided documents validating and defending his position as administrator in an action filed by Sulla before the First District Court, Judge Chang. The judge seized the funds until August 19th of 2015, when Judge Hara, there's our friend Hara again, Third Circuit Court, validated the trust administrator as William Patrick Zadalis. However, at this point in time, the family does not know what happened to the funds issued by the court, seized by the court. The trust administrators feel that the sudden death of their father was suspicious, to say the least, and there was no autopsy, and Sulla's request to cremate the body was quite unusual and against the family's wishes. Yes, it's unusual, but it points to one direction. Mr. Zadalis, the deceased, now resides with his beloved wife in North Carolina. And that's a good thing, because there might be some evidence up there in North Carolina. This attempt, my attempt, at getting a grand jury to investigate all that you've heard me sit here and tell you about for almost an hour, is not secret. It's all been published on the internet at code4blog.com. All of the appropriate agencies have the information. All of the documents are available to these agencies at code4blog.com in encrypted documents. But unfortunately, it appears the grand jury did not get the information. The grand jury who's really the one that I needed it to go to. Because of the inaction by the courts, the alleged perpetrators are now emboldened and have not ceased their activities at all. They have a belief that I cannot touch them. And maybe they're correct. It was my intention that this part 4 was to be the last of these little documentaries I've done on the affidavit for the grand jury involvement into corruption of the state of Hawaii and the court judicial system. But within the last few days, new information has come to light that further enlighten me and may even be factual, that the Department of Justice and the federal court system of Hawaii have been corrupted. Through all of this, I've always questioned why these cases that are seemingly insignificant in the whole of things to the federal courts and Justice Department of Hawaii would become important enough to risk individual careers of people who are physically and economically removed from these incidences. But some light has escaped through a crack in the door in the last few days. And you keep tuned, because it looks to me like this is not going to be over at all. So stay tuned.